How's it going, YouTube? My name is Elvin7, your resident Mistweaver Monk, and in today's video, I'm putting on all 7 healer hats because if you don't know, I'm currently working on a series where I take all 7 healer specs to 3000 IO. It's a huge challenge, but what it's done is it's given me an opportunity to play all these classes and all these specs more in depth and gain a bigger and better understanding of how the class works and which classes I find the most fun, which is what we're going to be talking about today. And that's why you see a tier list on the screen, I guess, this way. Now, a blanket statement, I do just want to say that I am still early on in my journey. I haven't taken each of these classes to the end game or done high level keys on all of these yet, so my opinion is going to change, which is why this tier list is made for people who are starting healing or looking for a new healer to begin your journey. Because let's be real, no matter how good you are at one healing spec, if you swap or are looking for some reason to swap to a new spec, you're gonna start out at basically ground zero on that healing spec. But also a quick disclaimer, just based on the nature of this video and tier lists in general, let's be real, this is going to be opinionated. This is my opinion, but I'm trying to come at it from, I'm coming at each spec from a new lens, basically, except for Mistweaver and Resto Druid. I haven't mained these classes ever, so I'm trying to come at it as if I were playing these specs for the first time, and this is my findings of which is the most fun and which is, in a current state, that is not as enjoyable in my opinion. Also, those of you with an astute eye have probably noticed or observed that there is a feral druid symbol that I'm using. This is not to signify feral druid, it's to be catweaving. I'm basically going to split up catweaving with what I have kind of defaulted to, which is just base, cast all your healing spells, Moonfire, Sunfire, Resto Druid for this series in particular, and I'll kind of just like rate them differently if you're going all in, playing the optimal playstyle versus if you're just playing the chill, casual, normal Resto Druid. So I've shuffled these up and we're just going to start left to right. So I'm going to start off with Holy Paladin. Now, I had the honor, the pleasure of playing Holy Paladin in 10.1.7. It was at that point in time, it was my alt. And yes, it was broken, but being broken has kind of skewed my judgment for this class because nowadays all of your spells just don't hit as hard as they used to. None of them are as satisfying. And since you have such a diverse package of cooldowns, you have like 6 different buttons that are high impact in a Mythic Plus environment. It feels like a lot of these abilities, instead of using one for an incoming big damage instance, you're having to use like 2 or 3. And it just feels clunky because every single pool kind of starts to feel the same. You go from one pool to the next, and even those small pools, since your base healing is just like less impactful than it has been in the past, and since your tier set kind of revolves around one of those few cooldowns, it just feels like you're just dumping a cooldown on every single pack, no matter the content, and that to me has not felt very satisfying. And stack that on top of their current identity crisis of being in raid healing, which this video is not going to touch on raiding as much, but obviously if you pick a class as your main, if you do look at raiding, you should also think about their raiding experience. And it kind of dips into the Mythic Plus of how they're kind of going through this caster identity crisis to gain holy power, and it feels very awkward, and especially because one of their main cooldowns is Tier's Deliverance. And in order to extend Tier's Deliverance, you have to couple it with that ability. I think it's called Hand of Divinity. I could be totally wrong there, but basically you pair these 2 cooldowns one after the other, and then you spam 2 casted heal spells that are instant cast, yes, but it just feels very awkward because you have to pre-roll this, and it takes a lot of time to cast, and you really you don't feel like a Holy Paladin, or you don't feel like how Holy Paladin has felt in the past when they felt good. So for those reasons, I will stick it down in B. You will still feel like you have a lot of control over what's going on because you do have a lot of those very high impact spells, but the fact is that they are just less impact than they were before, and the class as a whole feels a little bit more clunky, so I'm not putting it further down, but I personally could not put it in A or S. I don't think you won't enjoy playing Holy Paladin in Mythic Plus, but if you choose to go into raiding, I've heard a lot of bad things about how it's just a lot of people are quitting Holy Paladin right now, and it's because of their identity crisis. Anyways, let's skip on to Resto Druid. And this is specifically if you kind of change out of your cat weaving talents, kind of throw your hands up and say, I can't do it, or I don't want to. Because in my series, I am better at cat weaving than I am at non-cat weaving or playing the, the suboptimal way. But it's because that's what I used to play back in Shadowlands. I used to just hard force cat weaving necro, like basically feral resto druid, even when it was bad, but then it became good. But anyways, resto druid, it feels really good. It does. It feels strong even when you're not cat weaving. It's just resto druid is always one of those specs where if you play it for a long enough time, it'll just start to feel repetitive. And especially if you aren't cat weaving, because cat weaving adds a lot more decision nodes, which are always interesting, even if they make the class more complicated or more hard. It's good to have a lot of decision nodes, or in the moment you have to make quick decisions on what would be the most optimal spell to press next. And the base version, the reason why I'm playing this version in my series is because since I'm having to play so many healers, I've talked about it, I want to keep my hands from getting sore again because I did basically have a wrist injury. So I'm just playing it super chill, and we'll get into that once we get into the cat weaving part. But Resto Druid feels really rewarding, honestly. The hot playstyle, once you get it down and once it clicks and you learn to pre-apply the hots, or you get used to the dungeon pool and get used to when you should be pre-applying these hots, it does feel very rewarding. Also, the fact that, like, I always say this, Rejuvenation is a single target heal spell, and Wild Growth is an AoE heal spell. But with just how Resto Druid's kit works, applying Wild Growth to your whole party in order to just funnel more healing with your mastery into your tank by stacking more hots and using it as just another number, that feels really cool. And same with Rejuve. Stacking Rejuves, and if you run Germination, which with this build, I personally am running Germination in Mythic Plus, then having more hots on AoE, it turns these single target spells, it makes them have like a diverse healing profile, because if you have them on everyone, it's an AoE heal spell, even though it's a single target. I don't know. It's really cool. It's really rewarding, and you always have a good button to press. You also always have just a filler spell to press in Rejuve or just Life Bloom, or you can reapply your Efflorescence coming up to a pack, or you can Moonfire one more guy. Like, it just feels like there's always something to do. And although it just feels like you're playing a worse version of cat weaving, it still is rewarding. Your dots ticking, your hots ticking. You'll see a lot of satisfying numbers. So I think it is exactly in A tier. Next up is Preservation Evoker. Now, coming into this season, I was so excited about Preservation. I had so much fun playing it in the PTR, and then right once this season dropped, I was loving my Preservation Evoker. However, I feel like that is everyone's experience with this class when they first start playing it. Your damage spells are very satisfying. Giant AoE slamming spells. Same with your healing spells. Dream Breath is such a satisfying ability when it hits. Spirit Bloom is such a satisfying ability because it's like a 15-30 second cooldown that moves health bars. Like, moves every health bar. It just feels very rewarding. Also, the Echo Synergy Echo playstyle, now that Temporal Anomaly is like as good again as it has been in the past, it just feels really cool, and it has a cool class, like, spec identity. So I really enjoy the idea of Evoker. However, I've heard these voices of why people do not enjoy it in the past, and those things are, one, having Dream Breath, which is probably your main ability. You could argue Temporal Anomaly even. Having those be frontal, or like technically skill shot healing abilities that do kind of similar things that all these other specs do, where they don't have to worry about if people are in front of you or if your ability is going to hit your allies in order to save them. Having that coupled with your main spot heal, if you don't have enough time to apply an echo on that person and then use it on yourself, if you only have enough time to use Verdant Embrace to dash to your ally and heal them, if they took a big chunk of damage and you're trying to save them because they're in a bad position, it feels miserable, because it's kind of like you have to choose between you or them in that situation. And then also, the final nail in the coffin for this class of why it's not S tier, where I think it could be, is because of the range. The amount of times, like, I have a UI to where health bars will be grayed out if someone is out of range of you, but it's set to just like the default range of most classes. But for Preservation Evoker, like a lot of times I'll go to heal someone and I'm like, dude, why is this not working? And it's just because Preservation Evoker has a crappy range and it just feels awful. And all three of those things, after having played this spec more, has taken it from a possible S tier because it has a very rewarding cycle of abilities. Stasis is amazing and so much fun and like very skill intensive of a spell to use and play around. But it's taken it from S to bottom of A tier because these things, when they come up, they are so frustrating. It's kind of like if you're playing a ranked game, like say you're playing a ranked MOBA like League of Legends game, and you're playing really well, you're having a good time, and then you lag right in the middle of a team fight, and then you die, and then your team loses. That's what it kind of feels like to play Preservation Evoker. It doesn't happen often, but when it does, it is so frustrating. All right, now all that out of the way, moving on to Catweaving. Like I said, this is the more rewarding, the better, the stronger. It does a lot more damage, and it can get the healing job done as long as you prioritize healing. Catweaving is so much fun. So much fun. The only drawback, I kind of referred to it earlier, is that catweaving takes a big toll on your hands. If you, maybe it's just me or maybe it's just people who have it in their genes, I have no idea. But if you main catweaving for a whole season, you're doing some damage to yourself in the long run. The reason being is because you're always swapping stances, or for a lot of the time, you're swapping stances and trying to just squeeze in globals. But also this new iteration of Resto Druid just in general, which this isn't where I'm placing it, but this new iteration of Resto Druid in general, where they rely on Grove Guardians to do a big chunk of their healing, having Grove Guardians be off the global cooldown, meaning that you can be casting a regrowth and pressing the spell at the same time, getting both effects at the same time. It just makes it to where now the actions per minute that you're taking as a Resto Druid is just so much higher than those of if you're playing one of these other specs that don't have a spell similar that has that same off the global cooldown effect. That on top of just being a Resto Druid, you're stacking haste, so it just, all of that just lends to like, it's just go, 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 go. There's a lot of decision nodes that you're making even quicker because it's Resto Druid and you're pressing so many buttons. To me, I do think it is the most fun and rewarding spec. I just have to put the disclaimer of if you're gonna play it for a tier, just ice your hands at night. You know, like take care of yourself. But I promise you, it is a good time. It's very satisfying keeping all of the dots up or stacking a bunch of dots onto a boss and watching their health bar melt. Unleashing, I should say, a full Feral Druid Convoke if you're running Heart of the Wild too. All of it just feels so amazing when you just tackle a boss and just shred their HP bar, no pun intended. But yeah, Catweaving is so fun, so rewarding, but it cannot go in S tier because I do think it takes a toll and it has a pretty steep learning curve. But yeah, moving on. We're hitting our first S tier, guys. Call me crazy. I used to hate on Resto Shaman, but Resto Shaman has been the spec that I look forward to doing my weekly keys on the most every single week. It hasn't gotten old. In fact, it's gotten more fun. I feel like there's always a new little synergy or optimization that I can be doing because, yes, they don't have the most like refined tier set. I would argue I just don't enjoy their tier set, especially in Mythic Plus, as much as I do some of these other specs. Like I love all the healer tier sets except for like Resto Shaman. So there are some things that can be fixed to make it more fun and better, but it is just so rewarding because it just feels like it doesn't have that tier set working for it for the most part, or making it feel impactful. It feels like how you press your buttons matters a bit more. And I feel like there's just always a better button that you can be pressing, which is a good feeling as a player. Obviously, you're probably playing it wrong if that's the case, but it just feels like there's always a way that you can be getting better, no matter how good or confident you feel with this spec. And part of that is because they are the Swiss Army knife, kind of like how Holy Paladin was the defensive Swiss Army knife back in 10.1.7. They had a cooldown for any amount of incoming damage and for any situation. Resto Shaman kind of is the offensive version of that. You just have so much utility. You can AoE knock up, you can AoE stun, your AoE stun can hit twice, you have a kick on a very low cooldown, you have Windrush Totem, you have all these totems like, I think it's called like Stone Skin Totem, or maybe I've been playing too much Classic, but it just, you feel like a utility Swiss Army knife, and that is very fun. It kind of feels like part of their kit is what they wanted to do with Evoker, or I'm sorry, Augmentation Evoker, where it's just you are the utility in the group, and it feels really cool. But yeah, it does still have its drawbacks for sure, but it's almost impossible not to have fun with the spec because of how satisfying Healing Rain with Acid Rain is. Chain heal is. It's just so cool to get those fast, quick fire chain heals. Having Bloodlust and Reincarn is just very nice and very good quality of life for a healer. An AoE stun is sick, especially when you can get it to hit twice, and a kick is really good. And then your damage packs a punch. Chain Lightning is very satisfying. Lava Burst, it just sounds really good. It has that, like, I don't know if any of you guys play Smite, but there's this character, Bologna, that just swings a hammer, and just when it hits an enemy, oh, that sound is like the perfect bonk. That's kind of what Lava Burst has for me. Which all of that kind of just goes to say, yes, I am putting Resto Shaman in S tier. I think it belongs here. And also, funny thing, right before I filmed this video, I was already planning on putting everything. I had it all scripted where I'm putting everything. But I read a Reddit post where basically all the comments were all the classes that I'm putting in S tier were everyone's favorite class. So anyways, we're moving on to Holy Priest. Now, Holy Priest, in the past, I have put toward the bottom of tier lists. I have also put it toward the top of tier lists in terms of how much fun they are. And in the past, it's been based on their power. But I'll be honest, I've kind of lost that for Holy Priest because it's very hard to judge their power. They are always an underdog, and they always perform better than you think they will. So I've removed that from my brain. That part of my brain that would always judge how good they are, it's gone. Now, for Holy Priest, I have so much fun when I play the spec because it really is diverse. You can kind of take that build that people are playing in Raid, and they were playing before the recent buffs with Holy Priest, where they would you would run all of your holy word spells. You would run, I believe it's called Light of Naru, where you spawn a reflection whenever you holy word, and it's just going to be helping you heal. And you can play that machine gun holy word build that plays very well off of your tier set, but you have to be spamming Prayer of Mending a lot, which can feel kind of awkward in a Mythic Plus environment. So you can play that. It's very rewarding, very fun. Or you can do what I really prefer to do in this spec, and that is to play their current iteration that has been buffed, where you go like a Pontifex Lightweaver, spamming Flash Heal for spot healing instead of relying on like AoE healing and relying as much on your holy words, but it also plays really well with your tier set and with your holy words. And then also, now that Sanctify or Holy Word Sanctify, the AoE Ground Circle ability, now that it heals more, it feels so much more rewarding to press in a Mythic Plus environment. I remember before they buffed this spec, before they buffed Sanctify, I did a Galakron's Fall where I was on the final boss where everyone stacks up, and you have to heal everyone basically after that one person soaks with Chromie. And I double sanctified, and we lost 2 people. And then right after these buffs, I loaded up a Galakron's, did the same key level, and we get in that same phase again. I double sanctified, and no one died. And there was no like shouts or anything. The group had lower item level gear on average. It just feels so good. It feels like your AoE spell now has more of an impact. That on top of Trail of Light, like if you flash heal one person, the next person you flash heal, it'll kind of echo on the previous person you flash healed. It just feels good because your spot healing kind of double dips into AoE healing, and all of it plays very well because you can stack up your tier set and get good AoE healing now out of Sanctify. I'm putting Holy Priest up here right behind Catweaving, but with the caveat of if you want to play a spec for a tier and not feel the damage on your hands, then Holy Priest is here. But if you're just looking for that quick itch of your brain, pushing one alt healer to like 2500, Catweaving is just, in my opinion, more dynamic, more fun. But Holy Priest has 100% shocked me. Oh, and also, one thing I didn't even talk about, Burning Vehemence, I want to say is what the talent's called, where your spot damage ability now kind of cleaves an AoE and does like a big, like 75% of its damage to AoE. It smacks. It packs a punch. I used to think this spec just lacked damage, but it's because I was not optimizing that talent, or I was not playing that talent well, and it does so much damage. It does so much damage. It's very satisfying. I love where Holy Priest is right now. I maybe they could deal with a few more buffs. I'll have to get into the later end keys in order to make that judgment completely. But for the time being, I am looking forward to my Holy Priest keys a lot more than I am Resto Druid even, which is one of my favorite specs of all time. Same with Preservation Evoker. Like, it's just, I'm looking forward to this key more than these other specs. Now, moving on to the shiny new toy, Discipline Priest. Now, Discipline Priest has seen a complete rework, basically. A lot of buffs, just a lot of changes in your rotational abilities. And it's toward the top of the meta and has seen a ton of praise. However, I will say, Discipline Priest is probably the spec that I played the most after Mistweaver and after Resto Druid before the reworks. I played a ton, like spammed Discipline Priest keys. So I had a really good understanding of the rotation before all the changes, and I really enjoyed it. Swapping between Holy and then Shadow spells just felt really rewarding once you got it down. You were just doing more damage for basically free. It just took practice. And I enjoyed having Power Word Shield be very impactful and Smite not be very impactful. Call me crazy, I enjoyed that. Even though it was more difficult to get into as a new player, it was just a much more rewarding spec. However, nowadays, it does feel kind of crazy. Their tier set is really good where your smite hits twice. The talents that you take feel really good because your penance just slams damage, can slam healing too. You're just doing a ton of healing, a ton of damage, and it feels very rewarding in that sense. However, I think if you're someone who's a new player coming into the spec or playing the spec for the first time, looking for a class or one of these specs to main or swap to, Disc Priest having to play your Mindbender rotation where you summon your main cooldown and then just spam smite a bunch to get it to reset again so you'll have it for the next pack, it's not that rewarding. It really isn't. I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of flack for this, but I'm putting Disc Priest in the bottom of B tier. And don't get me wrong, B tier is still good. These specs are still fun, but I feel like they did miss a mark. Smite spam is good. It is. It's arguably objectively good, but it's not fun. It's just not. And yes, you don't have to fall into that trap of smite spamming. There's a lot of different things you can do. You can still Power Word Shield. You could use your free instant flash heals. You could just penance, but having your whole playstyle basically rotate around your Mindbender feels kind of bad because it's right once your Mindbender is at about like 12 seconds on its cooldown, you kind of have to smite a few more times to reset it before you can penance to get full value, and it just feels weird. Also, one thing to note is, yes, if you Mindbender, Mind Blast, and then penance, your Mindbender is going to go crazy with the damage, do big healing, and it's going to feel very rewarding. But after you've done that about 100 times, getting that 3-button rotation kind of down pat and doing that 100 times, it feels less and less rewarding each time because you're just so used to it. So if you're going to look to play Disc Priest all tier, you're going to play at a top level, or you're going to be playing at a top level, hopefully, because it performs very well. It has tools that are very well suited, and it's very strong. However, I do want to warn you, it does suffer from repetition in its current iteration. But I will say one of its most redeeming qualities is how awesome Uppies is. Ultimate Penitence is such an amazing and cool and satisfying button to press. But there is a caveat. It kind of sucks. It does great healing, does great damage, but you are so exposed and vulnerable while you're up in the sky because for some reason you can still be meleeed by like spiteful ads, for example. You can still be hit by swirlies even though you're 10 feet up in the sky. It just doesn't make sense. Something needs to change about the spell because it is the coolest thing they have, the coolest new toy that they have, but it's like the least optimal in a lot of situations, and it feels bad. It feels like, hey, here's a new toy, but it's broken. Or here's your new Nintendo DS, but you need like Wi-Fi capabilities, but we don't have Wi-Fi. You know, it just feels bad. It feels like it's missing something. And although it's very good, a very good spec, I could not recommend that you guys play it because, like I said, it does feel repetitive. And honestly, I'm having more fun doing Holy Priest keys than I am on Disc Priest keys. Now, moving on to Mistweaver, you guys know that this is my spec that I main. It's just historically been my most favorite spec because of how much I love the fist weaving playstyle, the melee punching and kicking in order to do healing and getting more side bonus rewards from it, like getting free renewing mist that spread, having Chi-Ji be such a fun and dynamic cooldown that has many different rotations depending on the situation that you can do. It always feels rewarding. It always feels like there's a skill ceiling that I just can't reach, but I'm getting closer with every key. So it's one of those specs where it feels like there's always room for optimization, and I absolutely love that. One other big upside to Mistweaver is that it has a very high skill floor, that your first Mistweaver key that you ever do will be better than your first Disc Priest key that you ever do. You're gonna mess up as Disc Priest. Atonement is just more awkward to get used to, but you literally cannot go wrong running your first like +2 by a J-Fire Stomp and then spinning Crane Kick. I mean, people will die to single target damage. You'll mess up mechanics. You'll just play bad, but it will at least do a lot of healing and be very easy and do big damage. Like, you can't go wrong there. However, that's just like the base. That's the skill floor versus skill ceiling, and I think that it is at a good level there. But one of the main drawbacks in the past to Mistweaver has been that it historically has been very squishy. Very squishy. You would die to things. It just did not matter if you could heal through giant AoE slams of damage. Back in like season 1 and 2, there were big mechanics that would one-shot Mistweavers that would not one-shot Paladins. Thus, Mistweaver could not be meta or could not be considered meta, and it just made it feel bad as the Mistweaver player. I don't really care about the meta or what's meta or whatnot, but the meta does matter from a player experience, because if you're someone who just ignores what's meta, other people don't for some reason, and you will not get invited to a +20 if the person who lists that key is like a loser and cares about the meta too much. I have to have the meta comp in my +20. But nowadays, having Mistweaver be so tanky, you have Bounce Back, you have Fort Brew, you have Dampen Harm, you have that passive talent, I think Calming Coalescence is what it's called, where you just take less damage. You have so many defensive options. Diffuse Magic if you want to go it. If you don't want to go it, or you think it's bad in that dungeon, you have Yulon's Grace. So, I mean, you just have so many tank options at your disposal, and also an AoE shield with Chi Cocoon just allows you to push topping groups and help the group survive and just carry a group further, because you won't lose a DPS randomly to like Yasma's dropping of the ads. So Mistweaver has all these tools now that it hasn't in the past, and if I was putting Mistweaver at the top of S tier before it got all these tools, you bet your ass it's going there now. Okay, Mistweaver is not only very strong right now, but it's very fun, not just because it's strong. I promise you guys, it is so much fun. You will have so much fun playing Mistweaver, and this is coming from the most biased source of all. I promise you guys, I'm a fanatic of Mistweaver, but I'm trying to be, I'm trying to remove bias here. It is just such a fun and dynamic class that has a simple rotation that can be as complex as you want it to be. You can start with a base, very easy punch kick rotation and start adding in those instant cast vivifies you get from Vivacious Vivification to optimize your healing more. You can keep your renewing mist charges off cooldown during your fist weaving or punching and kicking to optimize your healing more. You can always get better and optimize your Chi-Ji rotation more. So it's just such a fun and dynamic spec that now, especially in this dungeon pool, has insane tools at its disposal. Ring of Peace to keep like the fleas or the big the big like flies, those big like hornets that jump on you on Everbloom, to keep them from jumping on your party, to keep the spinners, the whirlwind guys, from jumping on your party. Also, to use Ox Statue at the start of a Taldazar, I mean, you just have so many tools at your disposal. You feel like a pseudo Resto Shaman in terms of utility, just you do more healing, and it feels great. And you're tanky. It's just such a good time to play Mistweaver, and I'm not just saying that because of how strong they are. Their kit feels great. They have really reduced the aspects of their kit that did not feel fun and rewarding in the past. For example, you used to have to press Essence Font in order to give yourself the Ancient Teachings buff. Now you just press your J-Fire Stomp and it can give it to you. So now you're not pressing a suboptimal Mythic Plus ability in a Mythic Plus environment. It feels great. Also, one of the biggest drawbacks was people hated that you had to stand on your Fey line to get the ability or to get the buffs. Now you can move off of your Fey line and dip your toes on once every few seconds. As long as you don't care about resetting that cooldown, it just feels so good. I promise you guys, it's fun, it's dynamic, you'll stay alive and play the game more than you would on these other specs. So if you're looking for a spec and are someone that is just die hard, I do not want to play Mistweaver, I encourage you to reconsider. And if you're still stubborn, try Resto Shaman. You'll really enjoy it. But also, all of these other specs are very fun in my opinion. And guys, that is this tier list. Hopefully I wasn't too biased for you guys, but it's hard not to make this tier list. It's a fun tier list. It has nothing to do with power level. I guess some of it is, you could argue, has to do with power level, but it's hard not to make this opinionated. But guys, these are fun to make. I know not everyone likes tier lists. That's why I try to stay away from power ranking tier lists and try to do something different. But when it comes to which one's the most fun, a tier list is just the best visualization in my opinion. But guys, my name is ElvinNinja7. If you want to watch the series that I referred to earlier where I'm taking all 7 healing specs to 3K IO, that link to the playlist will be down in the description. And while you're down there, hit subscribe so you don't miss one of my future posts. Hit like if you like this video and just want to help more people see it. It'll help me out on my journey to becoming a full-time content creator. My dream. I'm so close. I appreciate you guys for clicking those buttons. Oh, and by the way, while you're down there, also check out my Patreon. There are a ton of different tiers that you can check out. So see if there's one that's right for you. And if not, once again, all of those other ways are great ways to support the channel. Shout out to these guys because they were able to support my Patreon. I really appreciate it. And you are the reason why I'm still making content. So thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. But guys, check out all those links in the description. I'll see you guys in the next video. We're playing a lot of World of Warcraft right now, so check out my stream if you want to catch me live. But I'll see you in the next video. Until then, take care, guys.